Story 1. I met Devin on a Thursday night in the East Village. We'd matched a week earlier, but only started chatting that morning. He said he liked women who were spontaneous and suggested we meet the same night. Normally, I'd say no, but something about his confidence disarmed me. He wasn't pushy, just sure of himself. We agreed to meet at a bar off Avenue A, somewhere loud enough for conversation, but dim enough to hide awkward glances. He was already there when I arrived. Tall, blue coat, holding a glass of rye whiskey like he owned the place. He smiled when he saw me. Wide, practiced, but not warm. I remember that now. Back then I thought maybe he was just nervous. We talked. He was charming, not over the top, not trying. Figured we'd walk. New York is made for nights like that. Crisp air, bright sidewalks, the hum of people spilling out of late night spots. But Devin pulled out his phone and ordered a ride. "It's faster," he said, tucking his phone away. "Plus I know the guy." I remember blinking. "You know the driver?" He smiled again. "Yeah, kind of a regular thing." A black SUV pulled up maybe 30 seconds later. It felt too fast, like it had already been circling. I slid into the back seat first. Devin followed. The driver didn't say a word, just nodded and pulled away from the curb. The windows were tinted darker than usual, and the music playing was soft, instrumental, almost like a music box. It made the silence in the car feel heavier. I tried to shake off the weirdness. I asked Devin where we were going. "You'll see," he said. "It's not far." We passed a few familiar blocks, then turned onto a street I didn't recognize. The city lights thinned. The buzz of Manhattan faded behind us. I glanced at Devin. He was staring straight ahead, jaw tight. Then the driver said something, low and almost mumbled. "She's quieter than the last one." I froze. "What did he say?" I asked. Devin blinked, turned to me, and smiled like he hadn't heard it. "What?" "I think your friend said something." Devin looked at the driver. "Nah, must be the music." But I wasn't imagining it. I felt it. That drop in my stomach is like when a roller coaster tips forward. I looked out the window. We were headed north, too far from anything I'd call a bar. The streets were getting emptier, older. Shadows in the corners, flickering street lamps. I quietly pulled out my phone to check the GPS. No signal, no data. I tried texting a friend. Nothing went through. My phone was fine earlier. Something was off. Devin reached over and lightly touched my hand. "You okay?" I smiled too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." But my fingers were sweating. I was gripping my phone like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. I tried no bars. Then I noticed something. My phone had switched to a different network, one I didn't recognize. Something scrambled. Then the driver spoke again. "She'll wake up in time, right?" Devin didn't answer. That's when I knew I wasn't going to a bar. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. My body went cold, but my mind screamed in every direction. I was in the back of a car with two men who didn't think I'd hear them. Or maybe they didn't care if I did. The driver's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. Just for a second. They weren't curious. They weren't warm. They were dull, empty, like he was already somewhere else. I gripped my phone tightly and angled it low, trying to unlock it without letting Devin see. He was still sitting close, his leg brushing against mine. I couldn't flinch. I couldn't pull away. I had to stay calm, pretend like I hadn't heard anything, pretend like I trusted him. "What's the address again?" I asked softly, trying to sound bored. "I want to look it up. See the menu." Devin paused. "Oh, don't worry about it. You'll like it." I forced a smile, nodding. Meanwhile, I was swiping blindly under the seat, trying to get something, anything, open on my phone. Texts weren't sending. Location wasn't working, but there was one bar, one blinking dot of signal. I opened the emergency text shortcut I had set up with my sister a year ago. I typed 4 words. Help. Car. Not safe. I hit send. I didn't know if it went through. but I sent it 5 more times just in case. The car slowed. Not stopped. Just slowed. We were somewhere unfamiliar. Narrow streets. Maybe Harlem. Maybe further. The buildings were brick, but spaced far apart, with yards and no lights in the windows. This wasn't the city anymore. Not the part I knew. Devin leaned forward. "Take the next left. We'll go around back." "Back of what?" The driver nodded. I saw him reach toward the dashboard and switch something off. The music stopped. The GPS screen blinked black. I saw my own reflection in the window and didn't recognize myself. I looked smaller than I felt. Trapped. I glanced around, my eyes darting for landmarks. Anything. Then, from deep in my coat pocket, my Apple Watch buzzed. A single vibration. One I'd set only for my sister. I glanced down. Calling 911. It had gone through. Now all I had to do was survive long enough for someone to find me. "Hey," I said, loud enough to cut the silence. "I think I left my wallet at the bar. Can we turn around?" Devin didn't look at me. "You didn't." "How would you know?" He turned slowly, his face no longer charming. Just blank. "Because you paid with cash." I hadn't. I knew that. But he had a story already made up. Something he believed. Something he'd used before. The car turned again, into an alleyway barely wide enough to fit. My fingers trembled as I tapped the side of the door, feeling for the lock. No buttons, manual only, Devin noticed. He reached across, gently laid his hand on my knee. "You're fine," he said. That broke something in me. I screamed. I screamed from somewhere deep inside, somewhere primal. The kind of scream you don't practice, the kind you don't even know you have until you're fighting to stay alive. The car slammed to a stop. Devin grabbed my arm, hissing through his teeth. "Shut up." That was his mistake. Because in that same second, red and blue lights flashed against the alley walls, blinding through the windows. A voice shouted over a megaphone, loud and crackling. "Put your hands where we can see them!" Devin froze. The driver cursed and hit the gas, trying to reverse. The SUV jolted back, but another set of lights cut us off from the other side. Doors flew open. Officers swarmed, guns drawn. I've never cried harder in my life than when a female officer pulled open the back door and reached for me. She wrapped me in a jacket and said it was over. But she was wrong. It wasn't over. Because when they separated Devin and the driver, they found something in the trunk. Ropes. A second phone. 2 IDs that weren't mine. And a folder filled with printed screenshots. Dating app profiles. Photos. Addresses. None of them were his. He didn't even live in Manhattan. The driver had no license on file. The car was registered under a shell company tied to a burner number. It wasn't a date. It was a setup. And I wasn't the first. But I was the first one to scream loud enough. Story 2. I met Owen through a friend of a friend. He wasn't my type, really. A little too into vintage horror movies and obscure film references. But he was polite and had this quiet charm that made him seem safe. The kind of guy who opens doors, who waits for your order before placing his. When he asked if I wanted to go see a movie with him at an old theater in Dumbo, I said yes. I'd never been to that part of Brooklyn for a date, and the idea of something different sounded nice. The movie was one I'd never heard of. A cult horror film from the 70s. He said it was his favorite of all time. He didn't even tell me the name until we got there, just said, "I want you to experience it without expectations." I met him outside the theater. It was one of those single screen spots tucked between old brick warehouses with a flickering marquee and torn movie posters on the glass. Inside, it smelled like musty velvet and burnt popcorn. There couldn't have been more than 8 people in the whole place. I remember that. The emptiness. The quiet. Like we were stepping into a space no one else wanted to be in. We sat in the middle row. Owen smiled the entire time the previews ran, leaning toward me to whisper trivia. This guy directed it when he was 23. The actress? She disappeared right after this. There's a theory that the whole thing was real. I laughed politely, but his voice was too close. too excited. Like the movie was more than just entertainment, like it meant something personal. When the film started, it was grainy and dim. No soundtrack. Just a girl walking through the woods with a candle, breathing heavily. Owen leaned in again. This part scared me as a kid. I didn't ask why. The movie was slow. No plot. Just strange scenes stitched together. Rooms full of mannequins. People screaming without context. Flickering frames of dead animals. And someone whispering numbers in reverse. I shifted in my seat. I tried to relax. But the longer I watched, the more I felt like I was being watched. Not by Owen. Not by the people in the theater. But by something behind the screen. I turned to him during a particularly uncomfortable scene. A woman trapped in a coffin whispering, "He's behind you," over and over, and asked, "Are you sure this is your favorite?" He smiled. "It's not about the story. It's about how it makes you feel." That's when I noticed he hadn't looked at the screen once since the movie started. He was watching me. I laughed nervously and shifted away just slightly. His eyes didn't move. I tried to focus on the film again, but my skin was buzzing, like something was crawling beneath it. I couldn't explain it, but my gut told me to get out. "I think I need some air," I whispered. Owen didn't react, just stared. I stood up. He grabbed my wrist gently, but firm enough to stop me. "You have to see the ending," he said. I pulled back. "Owen, I'm not feeling well." He smiled wider. "That's the point." I yanked my hand free and walked quickly toward the exit, trying not to run. I glanced back once before the door closed behind me. He was still sitting there, staring. But now, he wasn't alone in the row. There was someone sitting beside him. Someone who hadn't been there before. The cold air outside hit me like a slap. I hadn't realized how warm the theater was until I stepped out. I didn't stop walking. Didn't look back. I crossed the street and kept going toward the corner, where a single streetlight buzzed above a boarded-up bodega. I thought about texting someone. Anyone. But my hands were shaking too hard. I told myself to calm down. That Owen was just weird. Not dangerous. Not yet. But I couldn't shake what I saw. That extra person in the row. That seat was empty the whole time. I was sure of it. And yet someone was suddenly there. Still. Silent. Like they'd always been part of the background. I ducked into a side street just to get away from the theater. The area was dead quiet. Old warehouses, graffiti-covered shutters, and scattered puddles reflecting the yellow-orange streetlights. I pulled out my phone, finally steady enough to type. I texted my roommate. The guy's creepy, left the movie early. Heading home, I started to order a rideshare but paused when my phone buzzed again. An airdrop request. From unknown device. I almost declined it, but I hit accept without thinking, and then my heart stopped. It was a photo of me, taken less than an hour ago, outside the theater. I stood in the frame, laughing, looking down at my phone. The angle was from behind a parked car. I looked around. The street was empty now, but someone had been close enough to snap that picture. I opened my camera roll. 2 more airdrops appeared instantly. The next one was of me inside the theater. Not from Owen's angle. From the back row. I was sitting with my head tilted toward him, mid-laugh, eyes slightly squinted from the screen. The final photo was different. It wasn't from tonight. It was of me in my apartment, standing in the kitchen. The window behind me is wide open. My knees buckled. I looked up, scanning every rooftop, every alley. Someone had followed me. Not just tonight, not just this date. This was bigger. I started walking fast, nearly running. My shoes slapped against wet concrete. I turned onto another block, heading for the main road, for people, for noise. My phone buzzed again. This time a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Don't leave the movie early." That's when I ran. I burst into a late-night pizza shop and locked myself in the bathroom. I couldn't stop crying. My phone was lighting up with notifications. The airdrop stopped, but now it was texts. Just sentences. Phrases. "You missed the best part. He watched you the whole time." You look scared. I like that. I called the police. Tried to explain everything. They took forever to arrive. When they did, 2 officers escorted me to the station. I gave them Owen's name, his number, the name of the movie, and the location. They asked if I had screenshots. I showed them the pictures. They told me to delete the files immediately and disable AirDrop. They said the photos would be hard to trace. But they didn't stop there. They checked the theater the next morning. The security footage was mostly corrupted. The owner said the system was old. But one camera worked. Inside the screening room, it showed Owen sitting beside me. And in the back row, a man in a dark hoodie, alone. But here's the thing. That man, he never left. Even after the lights came up. Even after the janitor walked through. He just sat there. Hours later, the footage cut out. They never found him. They questioned Owen. He denied everything. Said he didn't know about the photos. Said he didn't even own a smartphone. He left the theater right after me. No charges were filed. I changed my number. I moved. I stopped going to movies. And to this day, I still wake up at night with a start. Sometimes I dream I'm back in that theater, alone, in the middle row. The screen flickers with shadows. The seats behind me are creaking, and a voice whispering close to my ear. You didn't see the ending. Story 3. He told me it was going to be something special. Not a restaurant, he'd said, but better than any skyline view you've ever had. His name was Adrian. We'd met through mutual coworkers, and after a few casual hangouts, he asked if I'd be open to something unique for our first official date. I was hesitant, but his calm voice and easy smile made me say yes. He picked me up around 6:30 in Astoria. It was early March, just warm enough not to need gloves, but cold enough that the air made you keep your arms crossed. He didn't say where we were going, just that it was a surprise. We walked through a neighborhood I didn't recognize, past quiet brick apartments and chain-link fences. Eventually, we reached a narrow building with peeling paints and a broken light above the front entrance. I paused, but he smiled and said, "It's all about what's on top. The elevator didn't work." Of course it didn't. So we climbed 5 flights of creaking stairs until we reached a plain, locked door. Adrian pulled out a key. "Rented it for the night," he said. I laughed, a little breathless, thinking he meant the building. But when the door opened, it led straight onto a rooftop. He wasn't kidding. There were string lights, a folding table with 2 chairs, and a bottle of wine already opened. I could see the city skyline stretched behind him, Manhattan in the distance, flickering like a postcard. For a second, I forgot how odd the building was, how empty the stairwell felt. The view really was beautiful. He poured the wine and handed me a glass. It was warm, but I sipped it anyway. We sat, talked, laughed a little. He told me he liked being away from crowds, that rooftops gave him space to think. I agreed. The lights made everything feel softer, but something still felt thin, like the atmosphere was missing a layer. At one point, I stood to look over the edge. That's when I noticed it. No fire escape, no second access door, just one way in, the one we came through, and it was closed. I turned to check the handle, locked. From the outside, I forced a laugh. "You didn't lock us out, did you?" He looked up from his glass, eyes unfocused. "No one else is supposed to be here." "That's not what I asked." He stood slowly. "It's fine. You're safe." That word again. Safe. The kind of word people use when they know you shouldn't feel it. I pulled my phone from my jacket. No signal. Just SOS in the corner. I tried toggling airplane mode. Nothing. I stepped toward the door again, but Adrian was already there, his hand on the knob. "Don't worry," he said. "The door's just a little sticky." I didn't believe him, but I smiled anyway. My heart pounded, ears ringing. A voice in my head already rehearsing escape routes. If I screamed, who would hear me? There were no surrounding rooftops, no windows within reach, only the sky. the lights, and he. We sat again. He watched me drink, but I stopped after a few sips. My glass sat heavy in my hand. I asked questions. Tried to keep it light. What do you do for work? Where did you grow up? But he dodged all of it. Every answer was vague. I freelance. From where? Here and there. What do you actually do? I study people. I went cold. He smiled again. That's not creepy. I just mean, I notice things, behavior. You can learn a lot by watching. I nodded slowly, every instinct screaming now. Then we heard it. A muffled sound. Like a thud from below. He didn't react. But I turned. Another thud. Louder. Then something that sounded like a voice, strangled and distant. I looked at him. He looked at the sky. I think someone's in the apartment below us, I said. He didn't move. Just stood. Poured more wine and whispered, "Don't worry. It's part of the experience." I stared at Adrian, waiting for him to laugh, to say he was joking. But he didn't. He just sipped his wine, eyes half-lidded, like the sound below us was a song he knew by heart. I stepped back toward the rooftop door, tried the handle again, still locked. I rattled it this time, harder, until the sound echoed. He turned slowly, calm, cold. "I told you it's part of the experience." My voice cracked. "What is?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small keychain flashlight. He clicked it once. A weak beam lit up the ground. Then he aimed it over the edge of the building, toward the apartment windows below. Some were dark, but one, near the corner, had a flickering light, almost like a strobe. In the silence, we both heard it again. Something dragging, then a slam. I turned back to him. "I want to leave," I said. His smile was thin. "We're already here." I reached for my phone, but the screen was black. Dead. I hadn't used it that much. My battery had been at 60%. I clicked the side button. Nothing. No restart. Just a blank, lifeless screen in my shaking hand. Then came the scream. Not faint, not muffled, but clear, guttural. A woman's voice screaming over and over again, like her lungs were tearing. It wasn't from the street. It wasn't from inside the building. It was from right beneath our feet. I moved fast, racing to the table. I picked up the wine bottle and hurled it at the rooftop door. Glass shattered, the sound exploding into the night air. Adrian stepped toward me, hands raised like I was the problem. "You're ruining it," he said softly. I picked up the chair next, slammed it against the door. Metal bent. I screamed, hoping someone in the buildings nearby might hear. But there were no windows open, no voices, just flickering lights and that awful sound from below. He took another step. "It's just us up here." I grabbed a piece of the broken bottle, pointing it at him. "Open the door, now." His face didn't change, not fear, not a surprise, just disappointment. "You don't understand what you're seeing," I screamed again, louder. Then something snapped. Not in me, dot in the air around us. A loud click. A door opening, but not the rooftop one. Below us, I heard footsteps. Running. Then more screaming. A man's voice now, yelling something I couldn't make out. Adrian dropped the flashlight. I didn't wait. I sprinted to the edge, looked down. Fire escape. On the far end. Not connected to the roof. But if I climbed over the wall, I might reach it. I ran. Shoes slipping on gravel, I grabbed the ledge, swung one leg over, then the other. It was a steep drop to the fire escape ladder, maybe 10 feet. I didn't have time to be scared. I jumped, landed hard, twisted ankle. But I got up. Behind me, I heard Adrian yelling. I didn't look back. I climbed down 3 stories before I found a lit window. I pounded on it, begging. A woman opened it with a look of terror and confusion. I tumbled inside. She screamed. I fell to the floor, sobbing, begging her to call 911. Police came 15 minutes later. They found the rooftop empty. Adrian gone. Inside the building, 2 floors down, they found an apartment filled with speakers, wires, and looped audio recordings. Screams, crashes, whispers, all pre-recorded. No one had been inside. The tenant? Gone for weeks. The apartment was leased under a fake name. The rooftop was never officially rented. The lock had been picked. The wine? Unlabeled. The bottle fragments were taken for testing. I gave them his full name, photos. They found nothing. No digital trail, no social, no work records, just a first name, just a rooftop, just me. I wish I could say I never saw him again. But 2 months later, on a late-night walk past a construction site, I found something spray-painted on a temporary wall. 4 words in deep red paint. The view was beautiful, and beneath it, a hand-drawn heart.